Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series on the life divine with our beloved brother Ranga. We continue in our new chapter on matter, chapter 24, and you'll have to tell them the page.
The page number is 247.
And it's the paragraph that starts in the middle. Well, it's the third paragraph.
But these defeats.
But these defeats, yes.
Yeah. So, we read the whole para first. But these defeats and victories are only apparent. This solution is not a solution, but an escape from the problem. Life is not really defeated by matter. It makes a compromise by using death for the continuance of life. Mind is not really victorious over life and matter, but has only achieved an imperfect development of some of its potentialities at the cost of others, which are bound up with the unrealized or rejected possibilities of its better use of life and body. The individual soul has not conquered the lower triplicity, but only rejected their claim upon it and fled from the work which spirit had undertaken when it first cast itself into form of universe. The problem continues because the labor of the divine in the universe continues, but without any satisfying solution of the problem or any victorious accomplishment of the labor. Therefore, since our own standpoint is that Satchidananda is the beginning and the middle and the end, and that struggle and discord cannot be eternal and fundamental principles in his being, but by their very existence imply labor towards a perfect solution and a complete victory, we must seek that solution in a real victory of life over matter through the free and perfect use of body by life, in a real victory of mind over life and matter through a free and perfect use of life force and form by mind, and in a real victory of spirit over the triplicity through a free and perfect occupation of mind, life and body by conscious spirit. In the view we have worked out, this last conquest can alone make the others really possible. To the end then, that we may see how these conquests can be at all or wholly possible, we must find out the reality of matter, just as, seeking the fundamental knowledge, we have found out the reality of mind and soul and life. Okay, here we go back. So, for the sake of continuity, I'll tell you what he has said in the previous para. Okay. But these are not sort of those words, they are a summary of what he has written. This discord between mind and matter actually starts even at the lower level of life. Matter represents inertia, ignorance, and fixity of form. Life represents action, energy, movement. Therefore, life is always struggling against matter, in which inconscience and inaction are solidly embedded. This quarrel between life and matter seems always to end in the victory of matter over life because of death. The discord increases with the advent of mind because mind fights with both life and matter. Life imposes desires, attractions, and unreasonable demands on mind and matter, and matter imposes its inactivity and ignorance on the mind. This battle seems to culminate in a partial victory for mind because the slaying of desire and the attachment causes loss of energy, and the rejection of body causes physical illness. When man progresses to a spiritual life beyond mind, the quarrel culminates in a wholesale denial and rejection of body and life and even the mind. All three are banned as the creation of the devil. The world is permanent evil. It has to be cut away to enable the soul to escape into the stratosphere of the free spirit.
Nicely written.
The word stratosphere, high up.
That came to you.
Okay, so that's what he has said in the previous para. So now we go sentence by sentence. But these defeats and victories are only apparent. The defeat of life by matter and the victory of mind over life and matter. So, this solution is not a solution but an escape from the problem. So, let's review what the problem is, the discord between these three. That's the problem. There has to be a perfect harmony and a concordance between these three elements, but that is not there. They are constantly at war with each other. That's the problem. So, how to solve this problem of war is what he is discussing the problem. Life is not really defeated by matter. He takes up first life and matter. It makes a compromise by using death for the continuance of life. Now that's an interesting thing.
Very interesting.
Yeah, because death seems to be a defeat of life, but actually it's only a change of form. And that which is matter is recycled for other life forms. So it's not really a defeat for life, but it's a transference of one form to another form. So it makes a compromise, he's saying, by using death for the continuance of life. Mind is not really victorious over life and matter, but has only achieved an imperfect development of some of its potentialities at the cost of others, which are bound up with the unrealized and rejected possibilities of its better use of life and body. We have seen that when mind develops, there is a certain loss of health for the body. So there is a temporary loss. We saw that yesterday. Not yesterday, the previous session. So that's what mind is not really winning over, but it has to bear some loss. There's a loss in the life element. He's specifically referring to the ascetic who denies life by suppressing his vital and also losing the health of the body. When you develop the mind and the spirit, there is a deterioration in the lower levels.
Does he mean anything else other than ill health? He says at the cost of others.
Yeah. Also the body, remember he has spoken about the Iron Age and all that. When the mind develops, there is a deterioration of the body condition. That's what it means. So I think he means only that. I don't think he means anything else. Mind is not really victorious over life and matter, but has only achieved an imperfect development of some of its potentialities, the potentialities of mind, at the cost of others, which are bound up with the unrealized and rejected possibilities of its better use of life and body. You are denying the power of life, you are suppressing life because you want to suppress the desires, you are suppressing life also. Sri Aurobindo does not want suppression, but he wants a transformation of life so that the energy is not lost and yet the desires are gone. Transformation. Similarly, with matter. So, realize. Now, he's talking of the individual soul. The individual soul has not conquered the lower triplicity, but only rejected their claim upon it and fled from the work which spirit had undertaken when it first cast itself into form of universe. So what he means here is, he is referring specifically to the ascetic. The ascetic soul is running away from the lower triplicity instead of conquering it. So, when the soul descends into body, life, mind, it has to become master of body, life, mind. But it forgets its work and runs away. This is avoidance, not a solution. This is what Sri is saying in this sentence. The individual soul, he is referring specifically to the ascetic who denies life and matter and becomes free. So the individual soul is not really winning fully, it is only securing its own freedom. But at the cost of untransformed life and body.
And he says it's fled from the world.
Yes, that's right, it's fleeing. It's not a solution, it's an escape. So, the problem continues because the labor of the divine in the universe continues, but without any satisfying solution of the problem or any victorious accomplishment of the labor. Therefore, since our own standpoint is that Satchidananda is the beginning and the middle and the end, that struggle and discord cannot be eternal and fundamental principles of his being, but by their very existence imply labor towards a perfect solution and a complete victory. We must seek that solution in a real victory of life over matter through the free and perfect use of body by life, in a real victory of mind over life and matter through a free and perfect use of life force and form by mind, in a real victory of spirit over the triplicity through a free and perfect occupation of mind, life and body by conscious spirit. We'll stop here. So he is telling you exactly what he means by the solution. The solution is life must be able to use body freely as it wants. In other words, the body should not have any effect on, should not have any conditioning limits on the life, but life should be able to use body as it wants freely. That would be the perfection. So, right now, it is matter, it is the body that has a lot of influence on the life. It limits the possibilities of life. Life can't do exactly what it wants because of the downward pull of body. So that would be the first one. The second one, the mind would be able to use its vital and its body like true servants, but not let them dominate it. Right now, life and body are dominating mind. Desires overtake the mind loses. The body also is laying limits of capacity on the mind. But that should be reversed. Mind should be able to use freely as it wants, the life and the body. That would be the perfect solution that he is seeking. And then he is also going on to the soul. And they say, and in a real victory of spirit over the triplicity through a free and perfect occupation of mind, life and body by conscious spirit. So the spirit, the soul, should be able to use mind, life, body as its instruments as it wants. That's not the condition now. The condition is exactly the opposite. It is mind, life and body which is imprisoning the soul. But the soul has to become master and do what it wants with body, mind, life. That would be the perfect solution. In the view we have worked out, this last conquest can alone make the others really possible. To the end then, that we may see how these conquests can be at all, or wholly possible, we must find out the reality of matter, just as seeking the fundamental knowledge, we have found out the reality of mind and soul and life. And what is the reality of mind and soul and life? Mind is the representative condition of supermind. Soul is the representation in the lower hemisphere of Ananda, and life is the representation of Chit Shakti in the lower hemisphere.
Soul is not a representative of the psychic being. Soul.
No.
Connecting the hemispheres, upper and lower.
The soul and psychic, I told you, the soul is the undeveloped potential psychic. Na? So, in his language, that would mean. But he uses the word soul in a very flexible manner. You have to see from the context what he means.
He calls this same thing soul, psychic entity in Triple Transformation chapter.
Pardon?
In the later chapter, Triple Transformation, he calls soul a psychic entity,
Yes.
the undeveloped one.
It depends on the context, as I said. The soul is it's a psychic entity, but not fully awakened. The psychic is that when it is fully awakened. So, he is very clear about his saying, We may see how these so he's saying, let us examine the characteristics of matter to see whether at all spirit can have a control over it. Or is what the ascetic saying really the permanent reality, that it is impossible to change the character of matter, impossible to change life and its perversities, impossible to change the limitations of the mind? Is it that, or can spirit really transform these? Let's have a look at matter. We'll see what matter really consists of. What is its characteristics? Okay? So, we read the next para. In a certain sense, matter is unreal and non-existent. That is to say, our present knowledge, idea and experience of matter is not its truth, but merely a phenomenon of particular relation between our senses and the all-existence in which we move. When science discovers that matter resolves itself into forms of energy, it has hold of a universal and fundamental truth. And when philosophy discovers that matter only exists as substantial appearance to the consciousness, and that the one reality is spirit or pure conscious being, it has hold of a greater and completer, a still more fundamental truth. But still, the question remains, why energy should take the form of matter and not of mere force currents, or why that which is really spirit should admit the phenomenon of matter and not rest in states, velleities and joys of the spirit. This, it is said, is the work of mind, or else, since evidently thought does not directly create or even perceive the material form of things, it is the work of sense. The sense mind creates the forms which it seems to perceive, and the thought mind works upon the forms which the sense mind presents to it. But evidently, the individual embodied mind is not the creator of the phenomenon of matter. Earth existence cannot be the result of the human mind, which is itself the result of earth existence. If we say that the world exists only in our minds, we express a non-fact and a confusion. For the material world existed before man was upon the earth, and it will go on existing if man disappears from the earth, or even if our individual mind abolishes itself in the infinite. We must conclude then that there is a universal mind subconscious to us in the form of the universe, or superconscious in its spirit, which has created that form for its habitation. And since the Creator must have preceded and must exceed its creation, this really implies a superconscious mind which by the instrumentality of a universal sense creates in itself the relation of form with form and constitutes the rhythm of the material universe. But this also is no complete solution. It tells us that matter is a creation of consciousness, but it does not explain how consciousness came to create matter as the basis of its cosmic workings. Okay, this is a pretty complex one and quite a long one.
There's a footnote also.
Yeah, the footnote is there. The footnote is quite a big one. So we read that footnote. Mind as we know it creates only in a relative and instrumental sense. Even that we'll have to explain. It has an unlimited power of combination, but in creative motives, its creative motives and forms come to it from above. All created forms have their base in the infinite above mind, life and matter, have their base in the infinite above mind, life and matter, and are here represented, reconstructed, very usually misconstructed from the infinitesimal. Their foundation is above, their branchings downwards, says the Rig Veda. The superconscious mind of which we speak might rather be called an overmind and inhabits in the hierarchical order of the powers of the spirit, a zone directly dependent on the supramental consciousness. We'll discuss this footnote last at the end. But before that, we'll go back to what he's saying in the para. We'll have to go back to some basic explanations of how mind is a creator and all that. Okay, so in a certain sense, matter is unreal and non-existent. Now, what does it mean? If you see scientifically, what is matter? Even science has come to it that it's pure energy. Now, energy is unsubstantial. It is something unsubstantial. And if you go down to the atomic level, there is the nucleus and there is the electron going around the atom. The distance between the nucleus and the electron is so large at that level that if you blow up that atom to our level, it would be mostly empty space. So, what you are dealing with the physical world, that you see that it is absolutely solid stuff, is nothing but emptiness and play of energy. So it is not what we see it. In that sense, it is unreal. That's what he's saying.
And non-existent to you.
Yes. If it is empty space, it is non-existent. In Savitri, this very clearly he says that. It's magic, out of nothing it is creating forms. So when you see it that way, then there is another thing also, the other, at our level, biologically, what is happening when we examine the physical world. That we'll have a look now. Okay. That is to say, our present knowledge, idea and experience of matter is not its truth. The truth is that it is pure energy and vibrations of energy. But you are seeing it as solid matter. That's what he's saying. So in that sense, it is not true. But merely a phenomenon of particular relation between our senses and the all existence which we move. Now that also we have to explain. We'll take it up from the highest level. At the highest level, there is only Satchidananda, or if you want to use a very non-philosophical, only God exists. Nothing else. But He creates the universe. Why He creates the universe is another discussion, that we won't go into now. But He, very briefly we can say, in the Upanishad it says, Ekoham, I am one, let me be many. Yeah. Ekoham bahusyam. Let me be many. So it creates a universe and becomes the many. So now when he becomes the many, that which was one is splitting itself. That which was only him is now becoming all different things here. Sat, Chit, Shakti, Ananda, which was one there, have separated and become separated things. So there, subject and object are one. Here at the lower level, there is a subject and there is an object. Everything, you are an object to me, I am the subject, you are an object. So how can the subject know the object? God provides instruments of knowledge at every level of consciousness. So at this level, we are using, he has given us senses. So the senses are the connection between you and me. But as I keep going higher and higher, these instruments go on changing. When you go into the subtle plane, we are not using gross senses, we are using subtle senses. You go even higher, you are using the instrument of sight. You go even higher up, the instrument of knowledge becomes identification. And at the highest level, there are no senses or no intermediate because there is only one. Subject and object become one. So, I am telling you this because you have to explain senses. He is saying senses. At the lower level, senses are coming between you and me. So, if the senses are imperfect, my understanding of the object will be defective. That's what's happening. So, as you keep going up higher and higher, the instrumentation becomes more and more pure, more and more real, and more correct. So then you get the picture which is correct as you keep going higher and higher. Okay? So, now at our level what's happening? He's saying, okay, so he's saying, the another way of seeing how what we are seeing, the physical world is unreal, that also we can discuss. Okay, so when I am seeing something in the world, I am experiencing the world through my senses. And the senses are actually 3 in 1. I have the gross sense, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and my skin. So these senses are receiving the data from the physical world. Second stage of this process is the nerves are carrying this data to the mind, and the mind is interpreting them. And if the mind does not interpret, you will understand nothing of the physical world. They will remain as pure, untranslated data. Proof, look at the newborn baby. The newborn baby has all his senses working. He is hearing his mother, he is seeing his mother, he is hearing everything, doesn't understand one damn thing. Because the mind is not yet trained to interpret the senses. So the interpretation of the brain of the data being collected by the senses is very important. So, in other words, what your experience of the physical world is nothing but an image in your mind. He is discussing that later on. It's only part true. It's not absolutely true. But this is what the Buddhists and the Mayavadins say. That what you are thinking is the reality is something only in your mind. It's a half-truth. That's what Srimati will tell you a little later on. But it is true to a great extent. Okay? So, now we go to this. When science discovers that matter resolves itself into forms of energy, it has hold of a universal and fundamental truth. We know that it is, matter is nothing but energy. In fact, we have discovered so many ways of using this energy. Wood is matter, but we can extract energy from it. Uranium is matter, but we can extract energy from it. So ultimately, we should be able to extract energy from any form of matter. But that has not yet been done. But that was the ideal which the scientist expresses in Mother's drama, the drama of the great secret, the Grand Secret. They have had a shipwreck and they are all on there, and each one is telling his story, and the scientist is saying, my ideal dream will be when I can extract energy from any form of matter. So,
Free energy.
huh?
Free energy.
Yes.
Concept of free energy, right? Like,
What do you mean by free energy?
like, I don't know. I'm not a science, I don't have a science.
So, energy is energy. Energy is of so many forms. Huh? There is mechanical energy, there is muscular energy, there is thermodynamic energy. There are so many different types of energies. Right? Different. So energy is energy. So, when science discovers that matter resolves itself into forms of energy, it has hold of a universal and fundamental truth. When philosophy discovers that matter only exists as substantial appearance to the consciousness, and that the one reality is spirit or pure conscious being, it has hold of a greater and completer, a still more fundamental truth. So, when he's using the word substantial appearance, it is substance. So, there is energy, but there is also, if you go back to Satchidananda, Sat, Chit, Shakti, Ananda. So, matter is Shakti, that science has discovered, but Shakti is really consciousness also, Chit, because they are all same. Consciousness and power are the same. But is it supported by something? Yes, it is supported by the substance of Sat. So that also it is finally substance. That's what he's saying. So it is subtle substance which is conscious of itself, which has the power. And also there is Ananda in it.
I think in Savitri he has a whole section when that lower voice speaks of things, he says, I shall make water like iron.
Yes. That's the...
He sees the future there already, even in that lower voice.
Yes. But there, what I feel is showing the arrogance of science. Yeah, he's showing the arrogance of science. I will do this, I will do that. Okay.
Can we use
It has,
the words Prakriti and Purusha for this sentence?
pardon?
Can we use the words Prakriti and Purusha for this sentence? Energy can we call it Prakriti? And can we call conscious being, pure conscious being as Purusha? For the sake of relating the two concepts?
Purusha and Prakriti, when we speak, it depends on the context in which we are speaking. But normally when you speak of Purusha, it is pure consciousness and Prakriti is the energy aspect. Or you can speak of it as spirit and matter, spirit and world. But here he is speaking of consciousness, but consciousness can be more than Purusha. Purusha is a particular state of consciousness. Because that consciousness, when it goes to the highest level, it becomes Purushottama. When it comes down, it becomes the self.
In the chapter Brahman, Purusha, Ishvara, he uses the word Purusha for the word spirit.
It is often used.
Sense.
Yes, it is often used in that sense. So, now he is asking a question. He is saying, but still the question remains, why energy should take the form of matter and not of mere force currents? Or why that which is really spirit should admit the phenomenon of matter and not rest in states, velleities, and joys of the spirit? Why should it become solid matter? That's what he's asking. The word velleities,
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
it means a mere wish unaccompanied by effort to obtain. Volition in its weakest form is a very mild wish. It's not really a desire. Even if you call it a desire, it's a very mild desire. That's a velleity. Srila often uses that word. So it has to be firmly fixed in the mind. He uses this word very often. Velleities. So he's asking, why should matter at all? Why should spirit become matter? Why should it create matter? Why doesn't it remain in as force or in states, velleities and joys of the spirit? Why does it have to create matter? So now he is going to answer that. This, it is said, is the work of mind, or else, since evidently thought does not directly create or even perceive the material form of things, it is the work of sense. It is sense that is seeing force as matter. That's what he's saying. As you keep going higher and higher, you see that matter is really the equivalent of that sat. You start seeing matter in a different way when you keep going up. At our level, because we are using the instrumentation of senses, we are seeing matter.
So this chair,
Yeah.
the higher level is what?
Consciousness, energy.
Only energy.
Yes. In fact, Mother was that in the agenda, she says she's seeing everything in terms of vibrations. And vibrations is energy, forms of energy. Okay, this it is said is the work of mind, or else, since evidently thought does not directly create or even perceive the material form of things, it is the work of sense. The sense mind creates the forms which it seems to perceive, and the thought mind works upon the forms which the sense mind presents to it. This is exactly what we discussed. Now I'll read again and just remember what we said. The data collected from the physical world, the senses are collecting the data, sending it through nerves to the brain, and the brain is interpreting what you are seeing. And that's again another thing which is not mentioned here. But if the mind stops interpreting, which happens when you make the mind silent, the world seems to become unreal. That is the explanation of Maya, the nirvana experience. When the mind becomes silent, the interpretation of ceases, and you see the physical world as unreal. You see them as mere empty forms. Okay, so thought does not directly create now. So, which seems to perceive, and the thought mind works upon the forms which the sense mind presents to it. This is exactly what we discussed. I read that again carefully. The sense mind, that's a manas in the mind, creates the forms which it seems to perceive, and the thought mind works upon the forms which the sense mind presents to it. So the thought mind is interpreting the sense mind's images. Then you recognize that the thought has to come in. Because if sense mind is receiving the images, but I am seeing your form, but there is something else that comes in and says, this is so and so, this is so and so. So the thought mind has to come in to interpret the images.
The sense mind is called manas,
The sense mind is manas,
and thought mind would be buddhi.
buddhi. That's right. So, but evidently, the individual embodied mind is not the creator of the phenomenon of matter. So, what we are seeing at that level, although it is partly true, it is not fully true, because if your mind disappears, the world is not disappearing. That's what he's saying. So, it's only partly true. But evidently, the individual embodied mind is not the creator of the phenomenon of matter. Earth existence cannot be the result of a human mind, which is itself the result of earth existence. The mind is also made of matter. If we say that the world exists only in our own minds, we express a non-fact and a confusion. For the material world existed before man was upon the earth, and it will go on existing if man disappears from the earth, or even if our individual mind abolishes itself in the infinite. So, the individual mind abolishing itself in the infinite is becoming silent and going up to the self.
So there is a fundamental truth in matter.
Yes, of course, it is Sat.
It's
Yeah, it's the subtlest of substance. You can even say it is consciousness solidified, if you want, in that sense. So, we must conclude then that there is a universal mind, not the individual mind, but the universal mind, independent of others, which is subconscious to us in the form of the universe, or superconscious in its spirit, which has created that form for its habitation. So it is the universal mind which has created matter for its habitation. Universal mind, and when he is talking of universal mind, he is talking of the whole range of overmind, element mind, all this. It is that which makes it creates a multiplicity and creates matter so that it can live in it. That's what he's saying. So superconscious in the spirit, which has created that form for its habitation.
And this would be the overmind.
Huh?
This would be the overmind. Overmind.
Yeah, overmind, the multiplicity starts at the overmind level.
So that's what I'm saying. This universal mind would be the overmind.
It includes the others also, but overmind is the real. Yeah.
Mainly the overmind.
Yeah. Because in this overmind, manifestation has not yet started.
Yeah, because when he is using the word universal mind, so later on when he says the cosmic consciousness,
Yes.
the cosmic consciousness is at first accessible only in the overmind, not below that.
No, it can be below also.
But it's not the true cosmic consciousness.
Yeah, it becomes better and better, yes. There is a gradation of cosmic consciousness. Even at the higher mind level, you can have a cosmic consciousness. Just make the mind silent. If you are lucky, you will have a cosmic consciousness, or you will have only the self experience. He says that in the Life Divine, when you make your mind silent and go to the self, three possibilities are there. One, you see the physical world as unreal, and you are in the consciousness that the self is absolutely the reality. The world is totally unreal. Or if you are in the cosmic consciousness of the self, you see the physical world as real and then you embrace it. Or you see it as unreal, but you tolerate and don't come to conclusions about it and wait patiently, like Sri Aurobindo did.
which he did exactly.
Yeah, Sri Aurobindo did exactly that. He saw the physical world as unreal, but he says, I'm not going to jump to conclusions because I refuse to believe that is the divine going to create an illusion? I doubt that. So he waited patiently. Is the divine going to cheat me? He says that in other place. So he is not cheating you, he is taking you from one level of truth to another level of truth. One by one, step by step. Okay? Yeah. And since the Creator must have preceded and must exceed its creation, this really implies a superconscious mind which, by the instrumentality of a universal sense, creates in itself the relation of form with form and constitutes the rhythm of the material universe. We'll look at this a little carefully because there is a footnote also there. Okay. And since the Creator must have preceded and must exceed its creation, this is logical. The Creator must be before the created. So obviously it is that. This really implies a superconscious mind which, by the instrumentality of a universal sense, creates in itself the relation of form with form and constitutes the rhythm of the material universe. He is going right to the source of everything. I think there is a little bit of the triple status of supermind here. In the triple status of supermind, we'll have a look at that later on. He will tell us that there is the first condition is a static condition of absolute immutable featurelessness. Immutable featurelessness. You can think of it as a sea, which is absolutely at rest, without a single wave. Second, the waves start forming. The multiplicity is potentially being formed. But at that level, if the individual experiences that second level of the supermind, he will feel himself to be one of the waves, he will feel himself to be an individual, but he will feel that I am part of the sea. The third level, the individual will start becoming, the individuality becomes more than the universality. So the individual becomes more real than the universe. At the second level, the universe is more real than the individual. When you experience that, you will feel that, yes, I am very much an individual, but I am part of the sea. You come down to the third level, the individuality is more prominent than the universal sea. Come down to the overmind level, theoretically you have forgotten that you are part of the sea. And then the ignorance starts from that level. You forget that you are pure spirit. That's how he describes it. So now we go back to what he's saying. So, in itself a relation of form with form and constitutes the rhythm of a material universe. But this also is no complete solution. It tells us that matter is a creation of consciousness, but it does not explain how consciousness came to create matter as the basis of its cosmic workings. Now, we'll look at that footnote now carefully. Mind as we know it creates only in a relative and instrumental sense. It's only an instrument. It does not create. What does he mean by that? Our mind creates things, it uses materials which already exist. Our mind can create, it's a creator. I can create mobiles, I can create TVs, I can create everything I can create. That camera also is created by the mind. But it is using materials which are not created by itself. Therefore, mind is a secondary creator. The original creator is the supermind. That's the original creator. But our mind also is creating. It has got that faculty of creation, but it's a secondary creator. So that's what he's saying, instrumental creator. Okay? It's an instrumental sense. It has an unlimited power of combination, but its creative motives and forms come to it from above. Okay? It's got unlimited power of combination. It can take this material and combine it. But it can't create the fundamental matter that it can't create. That is already created by supermind. So, all created forms have their base in the infinite above mind, life and matter, and are here represented, reconstructed, very usually misconstructed from the infinitesimal. Okay, what does he mean by this? We have to see. All created forms have their base in the infinite mind above. Okay, there's a word, you have the word archetype. The archetype of everything here in the physical world is in the supermind. It is, or you can think of it in a more practical manner. You can think of everything that is created here, there's a blueprint of it in the supermind. And the blueprint becomes a reality in the physical world here. Okay? So, originally it is there. That's what he's saying. And it comes down here, it becomes a reality. So, very usually misconstructed, that's another thing. Because when it is coming down, the density of the substance distorts the truth of the thing. Just like if you put a stick in water, it will appear to be bent. So from when anything, force or consciousness is coming from one level to another level in a different medium, there is a slight distortion. There is a slight distortion that occurs. Because there is light and this light becomes less and less it becomes denser and denser and becomes darkness. So there are different layers of substance, mediums. And when it comes, this distortion occurs. That's why Srila is saying, very often, misconstructed, reconstructed and misconstructed. So that which is supermind becomes here mind in a limited way. It's a reflection and not the real thing. Okay? From the infinitesimal. Their foundation is above. Their branchings downwards says the Rig Veda. So the origin of everything is up there. In fact, there is an image in the Gita as well as in the Rig Veda that the roots are above and the branches are below. The origin of everything is above and everything, the multiplicity is below. So it's like a tree, it's compared to a tree. Esho Ashwatha Sanadana. It's the eternal Ashwatha tree. Ashwatha is one of the biggest trees in India. So the roots are above and the branches are below.
There's also a very negative connotation in the Yggdrasil tree, which is an evil tree, which the roots are above and the branches below.
What is the tree you said?
Yggdrasil.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. It's, I think, Nordic mythology.
I see.
Yeah.
So,
The Upas tree.
yeah, Upas tree, yes. Certainly refers to the Upas tree, yes. So that's the one, that's the reality. When it comes down here, it becomes a many branches. So that's what he's saying, the multiplicity. Okay? The superconscious mind of which we speak might rather be called an overmind. There you are. And inhabits in the hierarchical order of the powers of the spirit a zone directly dependent on the supramental consciousness. So the overmind is just below the supermind. That's what he's saying. And it's that creates the lower levels of consciousness. So we close today.